Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3.
Elaine, are we ready? Yeah. Is this on? I'm not hearing anything. Is this on? Okay. Who's sitting there?
So close to the chair. Sylvia.
Oh, so we've got South County in here.
Stick together. Hi,
Yeah.
how are you?
Good. I'm Carolyn Gonop, General Manager, and I haven't met you yet. Nice to meet you.
Sorry, I've watched you from afar when I've come to the meetings and I sit in the back.
Yeah.
As an hey, I'll say that too loud, we'll get security. Yeah, really.
Is the recording on? Great. Thank you. So I'm called to order the February 28th, 2025 VTA Board of Directors workshop / orientation. Rainey, could we please get the roll?
Yes, Chair. Abikoga. Abikoga is absent. Arenas, absent. Bozo.
Here.
Thank you. Ex officio Burt.
Here.
Thank you. Candelas. Candelas is absent. Cohen.
Here.
Doang, absent. Foley is absent. Jane.
Here.
Kamei is absent. McAllister. Here. Thank you. Montano. Here. Thank you. Moore is absent. Mulcahy.
Here.
Thank you. Sal. Here. Turner.
Here.
Weinberg.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Mahan is absent. Chairperson Lopez.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum, sir.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate everyone being here today, and welcome especially to those who are coming on as alternates, as regular board members. I really appreciate you making the time. We appreciate you prioritizing the additional time today for the workshop. This session is designed to provide a comprehensive overview of VTA's core functions and responsibilities. So we'll be covering key areas like our mission, our role within Santa Clara County, governance structure, finances, duties as board members, and other obligations. We'll then continue, we'll have a second workshop, and you may have seen the polling to continue some of these topics. So if you haven't, encourage your staff to respond to that polling. And because we have a hard stop at 11:30 for a special closed session meeting, we've combined the presentations for today's agenda So I know it may be tough because we'll have a lot of material, but I would ask you to hold your questions until the designated Q&A period. We have these lovely binders, so they're great for taking notes and coming back. And we'll also do public comment after the staff presentations as well. And thank you for understanding that because we have an important item. We appreciate your commitment to this board, and I look forward to a productive year serving with you and serving you as your chair and making sure we can all be successful. And now let's begin with the safety moment from Aston Green. Do we have something that we can share? Great. Let's.
No, I actually
Go ahead.
know what we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
When it comes to safety, it's VTA's highest priority. And one of the things that was definitely learned through some tragedies that had happened in transit over the last 20 years was it really starts from the top down. So the board has the responsibilities of adopting some of our safety policies, but particularly what we call the PTASP, the Public Transportation's I don't know what the A stands for, safety plan? What is it? Oh, wait. Agency Safety Plan. And actually, the board just adopted that last month. But it's very important to actually be able to go through that plan if you can and understand the roles and responsibilities of the board, myself as the accountable executive, as well as others. And then we have other additional safety programs such as workplace prevention program that we were one of the first in the state to do. It had to be adopted by July 1st last year, so we did that, and we actually have already started our training and went through our first rounds of training. So there's a lot of work that we're doing, continue to do on safety, and it's a focus of our culture and climate work as well. So I would say that okay, I covered the first part. Do you have a safety moment otherwise? Aston is our Chief System Safety Security Officer.
Well, good morning, everyone. Yes, if I do have a safety moment, you want me up here? Okay, sure. Yeah, our safety moment is that whenever we are in this room, you will see both law enforcement and allied security personnel. And if you are the chair for any of the committees in this room, that represents your sergeant at arms. So if there's any disruptive activity, you communicate directly with the security staff. You can call them up, you can whisper, and they can take action. Obviously, if they see something that's a disturbance, they are more than likely to take action themselves. But the goal is to keep meetings in this room free from any disturbances possible while allowing members of the public to speak freely and so forth. So obviously, we do not have any stanchions or any barriers, so we look to you to be very aware of the environment so that we can maintain decorum for the meeting. So that's my brief safety moment. I want to give you this one alert. In April, I will be doing a more comprehensive briefing for you at the county board. That's going to be a little bit more. You get an opportunity to meet members of our teams, and you'll know about the safety features in that room in particular. So there are certain things you need to know that we will do in a confidential setting. So look forward to having that opportunity. I will be bringing materials for you to share and looking forward to taking your questions at that time. So if there are no questions now, I will turn the chair back over to Carolyn.
Go ahead, Carolyn, for your next section. Thank you, Aston.
Okay, and good morning. I just want to give a brief overview of VTA because we are quite a multifaceted agency. VTA is an independent special district, and we were created in 1995, so this is our 30th year anniversary, and we will be doing some celebrations or events after July 1st, after the fiscal year. So that is a significant milestone. But for 3 decades, our VTA has provided sustainable, accessible, community-focused transportation options that are innovative, environmentally responsive, and promote the vitality of our region. And just a quick history, as I just mentioned, when we were formed, but it was really a consolidation of the County Transit District that was under Santa Clara County and the Santa Clara County Congestion Management Agency. And it merged, and at the time, the board of the Congestion Management Agency became the board of VTA. This merger was focused on really creating a transportation agency that plans for the future and focuses on integration of transportation and land use. The consolidation actually allowed for a lot of greater coordination and maximize the efficiency and performance of our entire transportation network. It also gave a large, I want to say louder voice, more voice to the cities and not just the county. So they were very, very engaged in the activities that were going forward. The signing of, it is a joint powers agreement by the County of Santa Clara and the 15 cities in the county, combined with the actual county transit district. This coincided with the effective date of the legislation that reconstituted the board of directors, which is what you are all here today, officially separating from the transit district. This slide actually just shows the mission and vision and core values, and we'll get a little bit more into this when we get into the strategic plan. We are actually updating a lot of this information. This year, this board will be taking on the update of the strategic plan. Next slide is that, as you can see, this is the VTA wheel of everything that we do. We play a vital role, not just in our county, but also throughout the region. We actually are pretty much a leader in the region and the state in a number of areas. To better understand the breadth of our responsibilities, I'll go over each of these areas. The most obvious thing, of course, that we do is public transit and the operations that we have there, but we're more than, can you go back? But we're more than a transportation agency. We're a multifaceted organization that delivers transportation solutions through all these programs. The green section highlights planning and funding efforts that we do as the Congestion Management Agency, and in planning and land use planning. We also program and fund and administer federal and state funds. The orange section illustrates our role as the contractor or in construction for project delivery. We have implemented countless county roads, bicycles, and pedestrian facilities, rail and highway projects to move Silicon Valley's workforce. And we fund our interregional services, and we manage voter-approved local sales tax programs like the 2006 Measure B, which funds a plethora of projects, and we also are the express lanes operator for the county. And when you come to highway projects, one of the things I want to notice on a distinction is we're one of the few county agencies, transportation agencies in the state and probably even in the country where we actually design, build, advertise, and construct the entire highway project under our construction engineering program, and Caltrans provides oversight. In most counties, Caltrans is doing that work, and they coordinate with the member agencies. We do a lot of that work ourselves. We've been able to efficiently deliver pretty much, we've touched every highway or delivered something on every highway, or not just that, built the highways or rebuilt all the interchanges throughout the region. So oftentimes, that's the reason why you'll see us coordinating directly with your cities and others to develop those projects and then help manage those. The next slide actually just shows our overall transit service area, which is the entire county, and the types of public transit services. We're going to get a little bit more into this when Nani Singh and Jay Tyree come up and talk about transit services. The next slide is something that we are very, very proud of. We've been named as the Outstanding Public Transportation System among all the large transit agencies in North America in 2024. This industry award was from the American Public Transit Association, or APTA, and it's honored VTA for its achievement in efficiency and effectiveness. The chair accompanied me when we won the award, as well as 3 of our frontline workers, and it was definitely, we received the loudest applause of any award that was awarded that day. The panel was unanimous in this decision for us to be selected. It looked at our agency over the last 3 years from 2021 through 2024, and we were really noted for our resiliency and in light of the pandemic and the tragedy that we faced in May 2026, and the key achievements in ridership recovery, workforce development, and really our establishment of mental health wellness programs that really help support the transit industry and our workers. Next slide is talking a little bit about the Congestion Management Agency as the countywide transportation planning agency. We were actually the first county to create a congestion management agency earlier on under state legislation, and our focus of the CMA was to develop and implement a transportation program in coordination with the local jurisdictions, really focusing on an integration of transportation and land use to reduce traffic congestion, improve air quality, and provide more options of mobility throughout the county. We're not We don't have any land use authority, that remains with the cities, but we coordinate with the cities. We're also responsible for the overall countywide transportation plan, and we develop the long-range plan that supports and enhances the county's continued success in improving our mobility. The next slide goes on to another function that we do to take another look at some of our key initiatives. We are, as this says, a firm believer of streets that are more than just avenues for cars. And so we do a lot of work here with our Complete Streets program. It's a visionary initiative aimed at creating safe, accessible, and equitable transportation networks for everyone, regardless of how people travel. And VTA developed the first set of guidelines that were used for this in the early 2000s. It was the first one for the region, and it's been a model for the region since. And if you don't know, a lot of your funding that comes with, we allocate for local streets and roads is because you have a pledge and a commitment as well to put these principles in place. So I really appreciate all the work that the cities and the county are doing in that realm. The next slide actually provides an example of all of our programming and grants efforts. For example, VTA allocates local streets and roads funding for pavement management, bicycle education funding, innovative transportation funding to our cities and the county that actually helps with our micro mobility or transit projects that we put out there. So those are some examples. We have passed 4 sales taxes, and we build and deliver the projects as well as fund all the operations. And if you don't know, we were the successor agency to the Santa Clara County Traffic Authority that was established in 1985 through that legislation, and we finished delivering those projects, and then we've continued to deliver projects throughout the county. So we were also we have been a leader. We were the first to actually implement a sales tax. This county was to actually build and deliver the projects. So that's how State Route 85, State Route 87, the upgrade of 237, some of the work on 101 was all done. And last but not least, we are also the express lanes operator, and that's on the next slide, for the county. And we began our first express lane operations in 2012, which was to improve travel time for motorists. As of the end of the last fiscal year, our net revenues after the operation cost was $18 million combined for the State Route 237 880 and the US 101 SRI 85 express lanes. We have a whole program to continue to build those out. These revenues are used to fund transportation improvements along the respective corridors, and that can also include transit operations and other high occupancy vehicle projects. And this will be the first year I think we're putting money into transit operations out of these net revenues to help support our services and hopefully the expansion of our services in the future.
Carolyn, let me just jump in for a second. I just want to emphasize, particularly for new board members and even I myself, it took me a while to fully understand this, but in many of our peer and neighboring counties, all these functions are split into multiple different agencies. So the fact that it's here within one agency, it is highly complex. It's a big agency, and if you ever feel like you have questions, there are people here as a resource. But just want to emphasize that and the significance of the role as an oversight board. Much more complex than many of our neighbors.
Yeah, I do appreciate that, because it is, in San Mateo, they'll have 3 different agencies, and then Alameda County, a plethora of agencies throughout. So I think the foresight of our elected officials in the 90s to create this agency really has allowed us to actually proceed and move forward in ways that I think the other agencies have struggled, or other counties have struggled in the Bay Area. Next slide is really talk a little bit about our organization, and I'm going to introduce my team. So, of course, there is myself. Just to give you a little background on me, I was hired in 1996 to manage the planning of the planning activities in the congestion management program right after they merged. So I did that, and then I don't want to talk about the plethora of different roles I've had in the agency, and I left for 2 years in 2019 through 2021 and came back to become the general manager. But I've always enjoyed this agency because there's always challenges every day, and there's always something different to look at, and we've been able to grow and really enhance what we do and provide better services. The board direct reports are also not just myself, but Evelyn Tran, the general counsel, and we also have the auditor general, which is a contracted position. The current auditor general is Scott Johnson from MGO, And Scott presents the status and results of the audits and the evaluations of the Governance Audit Committee, and he's also the staff liaison for the BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 Oversight Committee. I'd like to take a moment now to introduce the members of my executive team. In the Office of the General Manager, we have Greg Richardson. He's our Deputy General Manager, and Scott Haywood as our Chief of Staff, and they help me quite a bit in keeping things moving in the organization. We're actively seeking to fill the role of the Chief Financial Officer, which has been Greg, and Greg still is wearing 2 hats at this time, but we are actively recruiting for somebody. That division manages the enterprise risk management, finance and budget administration, all the investment services, procurement, contracts and materials management, and IT, technology. Next is Patrice Smith. She is our Chief Communications Officer. She and her team are responsible for community engagement, creative services, customer service, marketing, and media relations, and she has the PIO in her office as well. Casey Emoto is the Chief Engineering and Program Delivery Officer. He has responsibility for all the capital highway programs, all the engineering technical services, the environmental program, Express Lanes program. They're operated, if you don't know, we have a little center up above that actually is our Express Lanes Operations Center on the 2nd floor here. We also manage the transit engineering, all transportation engineering, and all construction outside of the BART project is managed through his division. Beverly Green is the Chief Government Affairs Officer and oversees the board office and all of government affairs. Tom McGuire is our Chief Mega Projects Officer. He's responsible right now for planning, design, construction, system startup, cost schedule, risk management for our mega project, BART Silicon Valley Phase 2. So he is everything BART right now. Nani Singh is stepped in as our interim Chief Operating Officer, who handles all bus and rail transit operations, facilities and vehicle maintenance, operations analysis, paratransit operations, and all the regional transportation services that we'll talk about. Sonia is the Chief People Officer. She oversees benefits and wellness, our classification, class and comp work, DEI, Employee and Labor Relations, Office of Civil Rights, as well as all the recruitment, retirement services, and making sure that we're compliant with Title VI and Title VII. Deborah DeGang is our Chief Planning Officer. She's responsible for all of the planning within the organization and the fund allocation. We do land use development review of the city's projects. We have, as well, real estate has recently joined her division as well, and transit-oriented development. She has the travel demand forecasting, so throughout for the county, but we actually generate travel demand forecasting for the whole region, and also the region to the south is incorporated, and to the east. So we actually include everything that's coming up from the San Benito, Monterey area, and as well as coming from the valley. So we have a very extensive model that we coordinate with MTC. And we have a major GIS section as well that actually helps for our geographic information systems. And last but not least, who is late, was Aston, the Chief System Safety and Security Officer, who handles our cybersecurity, environmental health and safety, fair enforcement, private security, the safety auditor, all sworn law enforcement that's contracted to us, and the system safety and compliance. So I just want to say my team and the employees here, as well as you and the board, really helped to deliver the goals to provide a safe, reliable, accessible transportation system that really improves the quality of life of Santa Clara County. And I think that's what I always talk about employee orientation, is that transportation really plays into the quality of life for people in this county. It provides access to jobs, education, services. So we have a number of objectives that we always keep in mind. One is ensuring that our employees feel valued because they're the ones who are helping deliver the services, increasing ridership and through enhanced customer service, ensuring we have stable financial health, and creating strong partnerships. So I think that's a brief overview of the agency. I hope that was helpful if you didn't know a lot of these things about VTA. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Haywood, who actually developed the last strategic plan as the Deputy Director of Planning, but it is now my Chief of Staff, but we're moving forward into our new strategic plan. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Scott.
Great. Thanks very much, Carolyn, and good morning to board members. And for those who are new, welcome to the Board of Directors. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about our strategic documents and how they interrelate to one another. And the graphic that you see up on the screen demonstrates this relationship. So the upper left-hand corner, we have the strategic plan. And this is our North Star document, which includes the agency's mission, vision, values, and business lines. It defines who we are and what it is that we do. The strategic plan then feeds into the business plan, which you see in the upper right-hand corner over there. The business plan takes the information in the strategic plan and uses it as the basis to expand on the business lines and creates the goals and targets for VTA. And for those who were on the board back at the end of last year, remember we just adopted the new business plan. Now, based on these targets, we then identify initiatives as seen in the bottom right-hand corner. And these are the programs and projects that help us meet the targets that we've established in the business plan. And then finally, in the lower left-hand corner there, you see the budget, which is the money we need to do the initiatives that we identified through the business plan. As I mentioned, we do have 4 business lines, and these are the core functions of VTA and are listed on the screen. It's our attempt to kind of summarize everything Carolyn just talked about and said, if you break it down into 4 sections, this is what they would be. The first business line is fast, frequent, and reliable transit, which is what most of our residents in Santa Clara County know us for. And that is to deliver transit service for the residents of our region. The second business line, project and program delivery excellence, speaks to our role as a construction authority and congestion management agency in delivering high-quality transportation improvement projects and programs. I could feel her coming up behind me, so I was wrong.
Here.
Sound better?
Yes.
Okay. There we go. The third is mobility solutions through partnerships, and this involves our role as the unifier and transportation advocate for the county and the cities of Santa Clara County. The final business line is the workplace development and well-being, and this describes our efforts and desire to create and maintain a talented workforce and create an environment where employees thrive in their careers. So for the previous strategic plan, VTA adopted the most recent one in 2016. As Carolyn mentioned, I was the one who helped lead this, and this does form the basis of our work today. However, a lot has changed since 2016, and as much as I love this strategic plan that I helped do, it's time for a refresh, and it's time to come up with something new. So we are starting the process of updating the plan, and shown on the screen is the purpose and scope for the new plan. Essentially, we are embarking on an extensive outreach process to create a plan that will give us a clear path forward as an agency. We will consider the change in transportation that has occurred since the last plan and ensure that we have a common vision moving forward. So this is a very exciting time to be on the board as we're beginning to get this going. So what is going to be in the new strategic plan? Well, we will look at our mission statement, which is going to help us define our fundamental purpose and who we are and who we serve. It will also include a vision statement, giving us a long-term vision for VTA and where we ultimately want to be as an agency. It will also it'll include our values to guide us how we're going to operate and how we're going to make decisions as an agency. It will include goals and objectives to define the outcomes we want to achieve and specific targets to help us meet our goals. Finally, it will include initiatives to accomplish the objectives as well as metrics to measure our progress. When finished, there should be no doubt, it will be very clear who we are and how we're going to operate. So we as staff look forward to working with the board members and the community as we collaborate and put together the new strategic plan. And with that, I'll turn it back to Carolyn.
Thanks, Scott. Now we're going to talk more about our employees, our people. You know, they are our most valuable asset, and their dedication really helps drive our agency forward. Sonia Morrison's going to talk a little bit about about our workforce, and Lisa Vickery, you might as well will come up and talk a little bit about some of the development programs that we're doing. But I do want to say this is really focused heavily on some of the culture and climate work, climate transformation work that we've been doing. That we started to do after the incident in 2021 in May. But a lot of it was through surveys we've been working with and then a collaborative process. So Sonia's going to go over sort of our workforce and some of the activities that we're doing with them and as well, and that we provide them, as well as Lisa will talk a little bit specifically about the operations workforce.
Thank you, Carolyn. So I'm Sonia Morrison. I'm the Chief People Officer for VTA. And first, I thought we'd start with some photos of some recent events and activities at VTA with our employees. So VTA has around 2,300 active employees divided across 4 unions and 1 non-union group. Our largest union is ATU, covering operations and customer service. TAEA is our architects and engineers. SEIU covers a wide range of jobs from IT to timekeepers, and AFSCME is our supervisory and management unit. Transit has, in general, a very small percentage of women, and VTA is no different, with only 24% of our staff identifying as female. We have a very ethnically diverse workforce, however, and we're above the available population in Santa Clara County for Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander. So those are good numbers for us. At VTA, the Talent Development Unit provide agency-wide training and mentor programs that all employees can take advantage of. VTA recently developed a leadership framework and with input from employees across the agency to identify 6 core leadership dimensions that all VTA leaders are expected to learn and use. That's what's represented in the wheel that you can see up there, and Lisa's going to talk a little more about it. These leadership dimensions are built into all our talent development programs. The dimensions are that we want leaders to be people-focused, promote mission accountability, be personally accountable, adapt and grow, communicate with intent, and create a safe environment for our workforce. VTA has a comprehensive suite of professional development programs. You can see them listed up here. I don't go through them all. And we're building on this all the time. In 2025, we're going to include employees who want to be supervisors with a new program rolling out. Our Supervisory Development Program, or SDP, launched last year and has been very well received. And our next 2 cohorts start next month. Well-being has been a strong focus, as Carolyn mentioned, and in particular for the HR team in 2024. This is some achievements from 2024 for the well-being team. We've developed partnerships, offered resources, hosted events, and provided direct support to anyone at VTA who wants it. We've received national recognition for VTA's work on mental health and well-being, and we're invited to present at 2 conferences last year. This just shows you some of the participation and the metrics and some comments on our well-being events. Some of the comments include, "It helped take the stress from my day," and "Thank you for actively getting VTA to move." And there's many, many, many more. This is where my heart lies in employee engagement. Employee engagement at VTA has many components, and it's really growing all the time. Culture climate is a strong part of this, and you'll hear all about this on day 2 of the board orientation. So from Family Day at Great America last summer, the first time in around 20 years that we've done that, to the quarterly HR coffee carts that are filled with treats that visit each of the yards, to Bring Your Child to Work Day, which is what the picture is here, where we partnered with the environmental group at VTA for Earth Day and Bring Your Child to Work Day. So we have fun at VTA. We're very committed to culture and climate work. We've brought back the Employee of the Quarter and the Employee of the Year, and you'll see those, they're presented at the board meetings. And we have more committees that I can list or even talk about today for employees to get involved in, learn and grow together, and to build a strong sense of belonging at VTA. So these are some metrics highlighting participation in employee engagement events recently. You can see that there were over 800 people at the Appreciation Day. We had over 835 at the Family Day, and we've served over 1,220 people through the HR coffee cart treats. So now I'm going to hand it off to Lisa Vickery, the Deputy Director of Operations Workforce Development, and one of my strong partners in this area. Thanks.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Board. All right, so let me talk a little bit about what we're doing in operations specifically for those employees. We're the largest group within VTA. A lot of folks think about operations training, and this first slide shows what they're thinking about. Bus and light rail technical training, training our new operators, existing operators, providing railway and roadway protection training for the public and folks that are going to access our railway. And then bus and light rail maintenance training. So we do a lot of training when we get new technologies, whether that's vehicles or systems, to ensure that our operations employees have the technical skills to do the work that they do. In addition, we have a very widely celebrated commitment to labor management partnerships and addressing workplace development with our union partners. Our most famous one is Joint Workforce Investment, the JWI program with Local 265 from ATU. That one focuses on our ATU represented employees, and it has 4 pillars: workplace solutions, career development, public service, and health and well-being. And we work in collaboration with our union partners to fulfill those goals together. One of the big, most obvious ways that that works is we have 5 apprenticeship programs. Our coach operator and light rail operator apprenticeship programs were first in the nation, service mechanic, overhead line worker, track worker, and we partner with Mission College as our educational partner. We just recently launched another partnership with another union, so SEIU Local 521 and VTA are working together to create a trainee program. It's launching now. We're in the process of going through the last selection for trainees, and that's going to allow us to train people to fill that very difficult to fill position. We also have multiple community partnerships that we're working with, veterans groups, adult ed, metro ed, to try to develop folks in the community who can come and work at VTA. It's a great place to work, and we want to make sure that they're prepared to do the kind of things that we need employees to be able to do. We also have been launching frontline-specific training within operations. This has largely been our de-escalation training program most recently. This is for all employees. It's not just operations employees. It's about 1,700 VTA personnel that will get this 8-hour-long training. Any employee who interacts with the public, supervises folks who interact with the public, or are responsible for safety at VTA will attend this de-escalation training. We also rolled out our workplace violence prevention plan, and we made training and reference materials specifically for our operations personnel. So that looks like a quick reference card that goes into the pouch that operators take with them when they go out to their bus every day. We've launched in part because of the leadership framework and some of the work that we've been doing in culture and climate to improve the training that supervisors are getting, and again, specifically within operations. That's documenting work manuals on the practices that we want our supervisors and managers to use within operations. Micro-learning, just regular reminders of some of the leadership qualities that we want to see in our management and supervisory staff, and then an ongoing training program that we're calling Refresh that focuses on hands-on training, and this lines with the VTA leadership framework very tightly, and is intended to translate those qualities that Sonia mentioned, like people-focused and promoting mission and accountability, and translating that into what can specific supervisors within operations do in a day-to-day way to advance those goals within the leadership framework and work within that framework as leaders at VTA. And with that, we'll conclude.
Thank you. And Nani, while you step up, we'll actually, just to break it up a little, feel free to get ready, but we'll take an impromptu break for questions if there are any from board members. No? Anyone can ask. Yeah, feel free to ask questions on this section so far.
On this session or previous session?
On the sections that we've had so far.
Okay, yeah, I have a couple. So, on slide number 10, which is express lanes, right now I see that the ending time to be on that, you get penalized if you're in that lane for till 8 o'clock. And I was wondering, it should be moved to 7 o'clock because it impacts a lot of people that don't know that they can get on, that they have to get off. Because a lot of the traffic it ends at 7. It doesn't end at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock is, in my opinion, is way too long. So I'd like to look into, a VTA to look into changing that to 7 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. Because it does impact a lot of poor people. That's always been my mission, to try to help those that are economically disenfranchised. let me see, the other one was, item 14. You said fast, frequent, and reliable transit. So how do you measure fast? Because, I mean, have you changed that? Because that was one of our priorities, to make sure that that the transportation, especially the light rails, that the speed is enhanced. Has that been changed?
What we're continuing to do is work on transit signal priority. So that is one of the biggest areas for us for
That was one of
for
our biggest
congestion.
concerns,
And
the
so that's
speed.
working with each individual city, and that is an area that we actually are putting a policy together that the cities can,
Okay,
That
so
will
I'm
bring
just
to
gonna
the
mention
cities.
them, you don't have to tell me what, those are just the areas of my concern. Slide 16, you mentioned you prioritize, so you have your strategic plan, but how do you prioritize those? Since we are a congestion management agency, shouldn't that congestion be, target congested areas in the valley? And shouldn't that be our priority instead of bike lanes? And then slide 17, strategic plan components. What is our mission statement? I haven't seen one yet to this day. And then, slide 26, and is building morale, so I really like that. That's really good, when you have all these, family day and, barbecues for the workers. And I think, do we get invited? I mean, it would be cool if we get invited to those, with the workers. So, yeah, if you can just let us know. And then on slide 30, you talk about safety, workplace violence prevention plan, but what does that safety plan entail? So if you can just get back to me on that. And that's it for now, because I don't want to drag on. All right, thanks. You can just let me know later on.
Thanks. Are there questions on any of the other content that we've had so far? Just clarifying questions? No? If not, I'll turn it over to Nani. Thank you so much.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Noni Singh. Actually, this is my first presentation to the board, so please pardon my fumbles if you experience any from me. As Lisa mentioned before, in operations, we have close to 2,100 employees comprised of, 4 unions, frontline employees to senior executives, and we work together to provide service to the folks of Santa Clara County. And in operations, we have bus and rail operations. We have paratransit. We have facilities that we maintain our infrastructure for bus and rail system and other facilities. And we collaborate with our planning team to plan, analyze the trends, and make changes to our service. And we also provide regional transit service to the folks who cannot independently ride our fixed route system. This is our map for our VTA light rail system right now, and it's divided into three lines. Our blue line that connects from South San Jose to North San Jose, also a green line that comes from City of Campbell all the way up north to Old Ironsides, connecting through downtown San Jose. Our orange line that connects east and west from Mount View to east side of San Jose. This one we go through so many cities, from Mount View to Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, Milpitas, East San Jose, downtown San Jose, South San Jose. Next one is a transit operation. We run our operations from 3 bus yards, Shibuya, North, and Cerrone. And then we have a light rail operations being run from Guadalupe Yard. Our Waypar signal crew, who after the tragedy, who were moved to a Zenker facility. So those are the 2 locations where folks from light rail side are being operating. Our third section of our transportation is service management. That covers our field operation team and operation control center, who manages our day-to-day incidents up to the special events. For example, Super Bowl 50, and this will be a critical group. Will be also taking care of Super Bowl 60 and FIFA events. Usually in a month they take 250,000 calls with a 95% above accuracy rate. On a maintenance side, we do majority of our maintenance for bus and rail equipment in-house, and also overhaul and repair. Every yard have their own maintenance facility. Bus maintenance facilities are at Stoney, North, and Shibuya. Light rail, of course, at Guadalupe. And our rail power signal team takes care of the infrastructure on the main line. And also we have our supporting team that supports with maintenance engineering, warranty, facilities maintenance, and also our non-revenue fleet. These are some fun facts number. We're going to have a quiz on this later on. That we have 441 buses in our bus fleet. We have 98 light rail vehicle, about 1,200 miles of bus route, 3,188 bus stops, and 42.2 miles of light rail track, but I would call it 81.6 miles because we go both ways on that, and then 59 light rail stations. Our ridership, 27 plus $1 million total ride, plus 27 plus million ridership, and we have a consistent increase since 2021, and I think we are at 84% of pre-pandemic level. We are very high on a bus side in our service recovery. On a light rail side, even though the number hasn't been very appreciative, but comparatively in the nationwide, we are doing actually great on the light rail ridership as well. And our paratransit service department, it's a smaller department, usually don't get that much attention, but they do play a critical role in providing service to the folks who cannot independently ride our fixed route system. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jay Tyree. I'm Deputy Director of Transit Service Planning. So the transit network is my passion. So I'll do the transit network hopefully in 10 minutes here. The next slide here is this, actually 2 slides, please. Oh, I have it. I feel like a Monday. Okay, the transit network map is probably the best to understand our transit network. So Nani already went over the light rail system. Actually, I like to say with this system map, you can actually interpret service levels in the structure of our network if you squint and when you're looking at it, because the system map uses line widths and line colors to indicate the service levels, and so you can kind of see the increasing service levels for areas that are the most transit supportive in our network. And so, speaking of in the network, we focus our most service, highest service level routes in areas that are the most transit supportive. And speaking of that ridership orientation, there's a really important policy that is a board adopted policy that we follow in transit service planning at VTA. In the transit service planning world, there's 2 competing goals for transit service. One is a ridership goal, and that's service that exists and is designed to provide the highest ridership. There's a competing goal, a different goal, that is a coverage goal. And that could include everything that's for a non-ridership purpose. That might be service to an area that wouldn't otherwise have service. It could be service to a senior center, a hospital, et cetera. Anything that's not a ridership purpose. Now, one is not better than the other. They are not ranked or such, but each agency does have to decide how to allocate resources between those 2 purposes. And the VTA Board of Directors in 2017 adopted a policy of putting 90% of our resources towards the ridership goal and then 10% of our resources towards the coverage goal. And so actually you can see that in our service hierarchy here, starting at the top and moving downwards. The top services comprise our frequent network. These are the services that exist and are designed to get the highest ridership. And then as you go down into the more local and express service, these are the more coverage-oriented services. And so it correlates to the map, to that structure that I explained on the map, where the red lines that you see on the map, the bus lines, plus the light rail network, those are the ridership-oriented frequent network services that are always coming soon. You can just show up and go kind of service, very high ridership and very fast, frequent, and reliable. And then on the map, the local services in blue and the express services in green. So as far as results, so that's how the 90-10 policy is how we allocate resources to designing our transit network. This slide here shows results on the ridership side of what we're getting out of those resources. And so every route in our system is here as a square on the screen, and each square is sized according to the ridership that it has. So you have the frequent rail services across the top, the blue, orange, and the green line. Then you have all the frequent buses in red, and then the local buses in blue and express buses in green. And I guess the big takeaway on this one is that 86%, or almost 9 out of 10 of our riders, do occur on the frequent network. So it really is the core of our network and the workhorse of our network. And that's not atypical of transit service design in the industry. So a few post-pandemic trends that we thought would be interesting for you all. First, as Nani said, transit ridership continues to grow at VTA. We've actually been an industry leader on both the bus and the rail side, actually, leading the industry in better than average ridership recovery. As of today, we'll close out today, February, it will be our 47th month of year-over-year ridership growth in a row consecutively. So a big improvement in ridership from the pandemic. And again, we are very much an industry leader. We have set a goal for increasing ridership by at least 5% for 2025, and so we have a variety of strategies that we're implementing to achieve that. As far as a snapshot of where we are in service recovery, this here shows where we are compared in ridership recovery compared to pre-pandemic levels. And so you can see the big takeaway here is that bus has recovered quite well, and in fact above pre-pandemic levels on the weekends, which is very impressive, and about 90% on the weekdays. Rail service is lagging behind, still again better than the industry average, and by no means are these atypical for the industry. These are kind of across the board. This is how ridership is returning in a post-pandemic world, but definitely rail is farther behind than bus. One interesting trend that we're seeing in the post-pandemic world is the strength of midday service and kind of transit network serving and all trip types, all day kind of service for what we like to say the trips of daily life, and not just a focus on the commute-oriented trips. And so this here shows the ridership by hour of the day over the course of a typical day, the typical weekday. And you can see for service now, as compared to service in 2019 pre-pandemic, the peaks are just, the midday comprises more of the ridership over the course of the day. So it really is important to provide a transit service network that has service all day long, frequent service that provides service for all trip types. And this has been a success for our network. Since we implemented our next network in 2019. I'll note that the peak of the whole day is around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and not a commute-oriented peak. So a little about our process here and what you'll see as directors regarding the transit service network. We collect feedback and gather data. We look at requests, we look at trends, we talk to operators, we talk to riders all year long. And then what happens is we develop an annual service plan for the following calendar year every year. And this is our marquee event. So in the April time period is when we start putting together all the things that we're hearing and we're seeing in the data into a draft plan. And then we take it through the community process, community engagement. We take it through a Title VI process. We get all of your feedback. We offer to sit down with every one of you one-on-one and explain the transit service changes that we're proposing. And that goes through the summer. And so every year, typically in October, the board of directors adopts the service for the next calendar year. And a lot of this is guided by federal Title VI rules. And so all major service changes, basically anything that's not just a minor schedule adjustment, has to go through this process. That includes new routes, discontinuing routes, making changes to routes, et cetera. So looking forward, we like to show this slide here. Maybe not. I've clicked it like 3 times. I don't want to go 3 slides ahead, but yeah, okay. Yeah, there we are. The one that I hate to see. Maybe I'll start talking about it. VTA provides less service than our peers, and this is an important thing that we are working on, which let me back up, is a result of the amount of transit operating funds that we receive. So the service level that we can provide is directly correlated to how much funds we receive. And our slide that I want to show you is the amount of transit service that we provide compared to all of our peers, Salt Lake City, Samtrans, Sacramento, San Diego, Denver, Portland, San Francisco, and Seattle. And we are second lowest of the group of peers, and that the only Sacramento is lower. And so that has implications for our network. Our service is not as frequent as it could be. There aren't services in some areas that we would like to provide service. We'd all want more service, right? And this includes bus, light rail, and paratransit service. And so maybe I'll just continue on. When we get it back, I'll point out the slide. Okay, yeah, it's this one here. This is the slide that shows the amount of service, and you can see VTA is second lowest amongst all of our peers. Now, are we ever going to get to San Francisco levels? Probably not, and that's not that's not probably appropriate for our land uses. But could we get to AC Transit levels? Absolutely, and we'd like to do that. And so the next slide is showing you our plan to do that, and it's called our Visionary Network. This was a project that we took 5 years with the community to develop, and it is our North Star for significantly increased and better transit service. It's basically kind of everything that you like about transit service, more frequency, whereas every route, every bus and train comes more often, more span, so expanded service hours, more weekend service, service to new areas, and then also service to innovative service models like flexible routes. And so the Visionary Network was developed, we finished the development in 2022, and then the Board of Directors adopted the Visionary Network as our North Star in 2023. So the phase that we're at now, or I guess the point at which we're at, we're developing a phasing plan to implement the Visionary Network, because it's definitely not something that you would implement all at once. So we're developing that phasing plan now and finishing that up very shortly. We'll be coming to the Board of Directors this spring with presentations on the phasing plan. And then in front of us next is identifying funding sources, because like I said, our service levels are directly related to the funding that we have to operate service, and so this would require more funding. So we'll be looking at all the funding sources that are perhaps on the table, what's coming in for express lane revenues, what's coming in from the real estate TOD program, perhaps new tax, maybe there's a TNC tax in our future, et cetera. So all of that will be on the table, and we'll be working with the Board of Directors on those. And then I think I'm coming up to my 10 minutes. My final two slides here are services that we coordinate and are partners with. So here's some bus regional transit partners that we financially support on all of these, and we coordinate our schedules to make sure that our connections work really well. The Highway 17 service to Santa Cruz, the Dumbarton, which comes across the Dumbarton Bridge from Union City to Palo Alto. There's the Gilroy to Salinas MST 59 that we partner with MST to operate, and then the ACE shuttles that come out of the Great America Station that provide a first and last mile shuttle for the ACE trains. And then finally, our regional transit partners on the rail side. I probably don't need to explain BART and Caltrain service to you all. The Capital Corridor service, of course, to Sacramento, and then ACE service for service to the Valley. I think the final point I want to make on all of these connecting services is that we spend a lot of time and energy and effort making sure that our transit services are connected and that our coordinated schedules when and where possible. It's not always possible in all places and at all times, but we do it absolutely. We spend a lot of effort to make sure that regional connections are possible. And that concludes my portion.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up a little bit on Caltrain and BART to understand the governance structure on each of those right now that Jay had talked about. For Caltrain, we are governed by a joint powers agreement that we are part of that along with Samtrans in San Francisco, and we are 1/3 partner, we're considered. So we have significant interest in this system, particularly also because it traverses the entire county from Gilroy all the way up to Palo Alto. And we do have 3 members of our board who sit on Caltrain as well to represent VTA. Caltrain is used to receive funding primarily through each of us working together with Caltrain, the 3 partners, to determine what could we have, what the funding would be for both capital and operating needs, and funding that out of our operations fund, our transit operations funds. But there was a 1/8 cent sales tax that has been passed by each of the counties. That's what helps fund most of Caltrain, though they are looking at a deficit because their ridership recovery has not come along as even though it is growing quite well, it hasn't come along as fast as, you know, bus and other agencies have come along. Also, a lot of the revenue that they collected pre-pandemic and that funded the operations was fare. And they had a very high fare box recovery ratio, and that fare box recovery ratio left with the pandemic. And then bringing on electrification is a more costly endeavor on operations-wise than the diesel engines that they were running. But we also contribute through our Measure B 2016 program. We have in the past on our other measure programs. And in the Measure B program, we have two areas primarily. One is the Caltrain, primarily future improvements, system improvements throughout. And then we also have the grade separations, which are in Palo Alto, Mountain View, and Sunnyvale. There is funding for each of those. So just when it comes to contributing, the cost scenarios are a little different. The scenarios right now for operations is we fund based on AM boardings, and for capital costs, it's a one-third, 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 except for facilities that are specifically in your county that serve your county, such as stations, and then they're fully on that county for funding sources. I mean, we can go for grants, and Caltrain goes for grants, but oftentimes we are very much driven to also go after the grants and the grant monies to fund the things that we need as well. So we truly are partners, because Caltrain completely depends on the three agencies and the county sales taxes to get funded.
Is there a reason why Amtrak is not on there? On that list?
We have Capital Corridor, which is Amtrak, but there's a couple other Amtrak trains that come in to San Jose, a few others, but it's mostly for commuter services, and the partners that we're partners with Capital Corridor, and actually, Board Member Jane sits on that board.
The reason why I'm asking is a lot of people are moving to the Central Valley because of the high cost of living here, and they do take Amtrak.
Sorry, could we hold off on question? We'll have a chance coming up soon. Thank you.
Okay, and then on BART, I just want to talk a little bit about the VTA and BART partnership. Because we're not part of the BART district, we are guided by a comprehensive agreement that was signed in 2001, and an operations and maintenance agreement, which provides a framework for how we fund operations that was established as we moved forward into running the extension to Berryessa. So this is a very simplified version, because you do not want, I mean, if you ever want a copy of it, we do have copies of the conference agreement. That's not that long. The O&M agreement is very, very long. But we pay for all costs, capital, operations, maintenance associated with the extension into our county. And actually, it includes the extension that's just a little bit south of Warm Springs. So we do cover part of the extension that's in Alameda County. We do all the contracting, procurement, design, and construction, while BART provides us standards. We construct to their industry standards, their codes, their regulations. We retain ownership of all the infrastructure. So all the BART stations is a VTA asset. So if you see a BART station in Santa Clara County, it's our asset. The track's our asset as well. BART, primarily, while we're developing it, provides all the technical assistance that we need. They operate and maintain based on the O&M agreement, and they do the service planning as well for the system, and that was critical. So they plan for the system, knowing sort of what the ridership is and moving forward. There's a very complicated flow of funds on how we fund them, and we can go over that at another time. But there is a trust that we put monies in from our 2018 BART, the 2018 sales tax that we have for BART operations and maintenance. That's primarily what funds the operations and maintenance at this point. So I think that covers on, oh no, and I just wanted to let you know, we were talking about ridership. This is our ridership on BART. BART has not recovered to any extent that even Caltrain has recovered at this point, though their ridership is going up. But this is our ridership at our two stations, at the Milpitas, which is in the green, and the Berryessa station that's at in the blue. But I think we will continue to see strong use. What's really helping BART is also events, and that's also helping us as well. So that currently is the ridership that we have received over the last 3 years, over a month. So I think that, do you want to take Q&A on this part?
Yeah. See, so I promised we'd have a chance soon. Director Montano, go ahead. Did you have a question, or did you get it?
I just wanted to ask about
Yeah.
about Amtrak, because a lot of people do, is this thing on? A lot of people do take Amtrak. They use Amtrak and then they transport on a bus that takes them to the Diridon station. So there's a lot more people coming from the Central Valley. So I was just wondering why Amtrak is not on that list.
Oh, I think primarily, they weren't on the list because we were talking about where we have the specific partnerships, but you're right, they do serve us into this county as
Yeah.
well.
I think we need to start focusing on, and then also, can you enlighten me on the ACE shuttle? Where does that come from? Is it Tracy?
No, do you want to, okay, so the ACE Commuter Express comes from the valley,
So, yeah, the Central Valley.
but then we provide the shuttle services. Do you want?
Yeah, it's a Stockton to Diridon service. It's 4 trains westbound in the morning and then 4 trains eastbound in the evening. And we provide the connecting service. The kind of the largest station for ridership is Great America Station, and so because of all the jobs, and so we provide a network of shuttles. I think there's 9 or something like that that kind of fan out. You know, they meet the trains. It's scheduled with the trains. Everybody gets off the train, gets on the bus, and they go right away. And it's a really great first last mile connection.
So is it frequent, is it just like one time a day, or is it?
It's 4 trains, so
4
they're
train.
about an hour apart, depending
Okay,
on the
well,
train.
that's good, because there's, like I said, the demand is getting bigger and bigger. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Director Kamei.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Jay, you may want to say that. No, even though, this is not my first year, I guess, when we have these orientations, there's always some, it's like watching a movie and then saying, hey, I didn't catch that the first time. So it's really great to see that ridership has gone up. One of the things I'm very curious about is, as you were talking about your annual transit service plan process, I'm very curious as to what the customer says. What do the passengers feel? What do the operators feel? And I think that year over year, it would inform us in terms of, hey, this is working, this is not working. So I'd be curious to get, and I don't know if you have, that kind of data, but I think that it's important because one of the things that I have heard from some customers is that, oh, why aren't, simple things like, why aren't there, trash receptacles on the bus? I don't know. The other thing is safety, right? Some people, and I don't know if it's on particular lines or particular buses or not exactly pinpointing, but some people have told me that they don't feel safe taking the bus. They don't feel safe taking the light rail, right? And, it could be sort of one-off incidents that they may have experienced or whatever, but I think that we need to be mindful, and I actually would like to know if there's some kind of a safety plan or what is available for both passengers and operators, right? We don't need to discuss it today, but I just wanted to let you know what I'm hearing. It may be a small microcosm of the entire system, but, I represent the west side of San Jose, and I know that there isn't as much service as there is in other parts, so maybe that's an isolated incident. But I think that as we move forward with, where we want to prioritize, I would just like to know what people are feeling, what are they saying, how does it compare year over year, because it's great that ridership is increasing, but would it increase much more if people felt, oh, this is a great way to travel or to do or whatever, I think that we can do more there. And that leads to your slide 49 that talks about providing less service per capita than most peers. I'd like to know, what are we doing to improve, right? And perhaps we can look at some of this information and say, these are some of the things we can do. So safety and, what customers and operators feel like would make it a better experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just real quickly answer on a few things? One is that Patrice's group, we are starting like a benchmarking survey that is done every year on customer satisfaction. So we get information from there, and we can see year over year what's going on. So that's going to be going on. We're also planning on doing an employee survey every year, and then we'll focus also on safety and to get that benchmark. We didn't have real good benchmarks or a lot of surveying data, so that's a lot of the work that we need to do. There's a lot of work looking at improving transit service, and we've hired more operators this year than we thought we need, and some of that is due to some of the service utilization, but it's also due to traffic congestion. So if we can deal with some of the concerns, such as Director Montano mentioned, is the signal priority and those types of things, that could potentially support buses moving faster, so we able to have more hours that we could put on increased services. So I think that topic you're talking about needs to be directly addressed. The last thing we're doing as an initiative is actually developing a customer experience plan. There, an action plan that actually looks at the whole journey for somebody across it, and actually looking at ways that we can improve that experience throughout, because we understand that ridership increases based on the customer experience. So those will be things we're looking at. So appreciate your comments. Thank you.
What I would say is that if you're doing this annual transit service plan process and you gather information, that's already information that you have. So great that you're going to do these surveys and all of that, but, you can make, improvements just by the information that you have gathered already. I mean, I'm assuming that every year, as you're looking at this, you can say, oh, this is an area that's working really well. This is an area that's not working as well. Why is that, right? Yeah. And you already have that data, right? So I think what I see is that it takes a long time to get some of these things going. And I would rather use what you have and, make decisions on existing data. You could bring in that other data later, but you could take greater, and more immediate actions and not wait till, oh, next year we're going to do this other survey and all. Use what you have.
Yeah, I appreciate the thoughts. Just if I could have 30 seconds on feedback, we really do appreciate and gather. We have a very robust feedback process, actually processes. We gather writer feedback. Every day we get comments in from writers. We meet with them monthly. We meet with them quarterly. We set up tables and at the divisions and just chat with operators. Sorry, I meant to say operators. And then writer feedback, we have a whole Salesforce back-end system that tracks every comment. So when you're getting an annual service plan, and we talk about this at SSTP&O, but again, we're happy to sit down with every director one-on-one, and we can go through all the themes that we're seeing from the writer feedback, the operator feedback, et cetera. But it's all comes out in the annual transit service. So yes, I guess the answer is yes, we absolutely appreciate and do collect all that feedback and use it every year.
Yeah, I think it's great, but I also think that, they're the customer, right? And then you have the customer and the employee. And I think that, we need to ensure that it is a good experience, or else they don't come back. So I just think that it's good information to know, and it's great to have it sort of in a summary form here. I'm not on SSTPO, so I would switch with somebody, but but I think that it is something that we can utilize now to inform us in making decisions. So thank you so much.
We'll do Director Sell, then Director Jane, and then Director McAllister.
Hi, this is great information. I was looking at slide 34, the light rail slide. So on it is Moffett Park in Sunnyvale. So over the next few years into the future, we're redeveloping, we're zoning that for redevelopment. Currently it's industrial. We have a goal of 20,000 housing units out there, which are not there now. And it's away from a lot of transit except for light rail. So light rail is key to speed up. So, whatever you're doing to work with the cities or whatever your investments are to speed that up, I think that would be really important to make that area a success for those 20,000 housing units, retail, and business. And you probably already know that, because, yeah, okay, so
Yeah,
keep doing that.
We're very excited. We've been working with the city staff on that project for years now, and very excited about what's coming. And yeah, we're working on TSP, working on the bus. We can't forget about Rapid 523 that goes up there as well. It serves a lot of people as well. So we're very excited about that area. Yeah.
Okay, and the business groups are up there, and whenever I see them, they ask me, what's the feedback? How is light rail going? And so it would be nice if, in the business groups, you can update them on what VTA is doing in terms of that, so they can foresee into the future. And then for State Route 85, I know there was a thought of, in the middle of it, having some kind of light rail or something in there, but maybe that's too expensive on State Route 85. But would you conceive of having maybe in the future like a rapid bus system there, and that since there is right away in the middle, just a thought for that, so that it can have a high-speed bus line that goes around the West Valley? That would be great. And then my last thought is that in Sunnyvale, we have a city that's like 5 miles wide, and our major high schools, 2 of them are in the southern part of the city, and a lot of students are in the rest of the city. So they rely on VTA to get them to school, which the school district realizes that. And so for half of the city, they have free bus passes for the students. And that has engendered a lot of students to want to take VTA bus, and has engendered a lot of goodwill towards VTA when I talk to parents in the community. So that kind of partnering with the school district, understanding their challenges. I know throughout the valley, there's schools that are closing, and then so people are going to maybe be farther away from their high school. So understanding that shift and working with the school districts, because it's hard for a school district that doesn't have a bus line to all of a sudden have these students that have to go further. So just my input on that. But thank you, and I want to congratulate you for being awarded the big award last year. That is really impressive. So thank you. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
My question is related to slide 55, which is the VTA BART partnership, which I know you said is extremely complicated and could take a whole meeting by itself. My question is that VTA's responsibility to pay all the costs, capital, operations, and maintenance associated with the extension, but then BART is responsible for all the operations. So do they run the operations and we just pay for it? I know they're hitting a fiscal cliff.
Yeah, so they run it, and then there's a sort of, there's an agreement that actually defines how they calculate the operating cost for us. And then we check it, we audit it, we have different processes to look at it, and then we fund that portion that they operate.
Right. So my question is that, as we're building these extensions, I'm very concerned about reducing the expected operations and maintenance costs of these stations that we're building. And so since we're paying for that, it's important to me that we really focus on the operations and maintenance costs.
Yeah, right now, I think that I agree with you, that's really key to us. They have a very high fixed cost at BART, and they admit that because part of their fiscal cliff is they could reduce a lot of service, and they're still not going to see a lot of costs driven because they have a very high fixed cost. We pay a portion of that fixed cost, not all of that fixed cost. But how we build our stations and some of the activities around the overall maintenance, particularly maintenance, has to, we do have to take a look at that as their ability to maintain and what that cost could be to us if we create anything that's different than what they do, or much more time intensive because it's the labor costs.
Thanks, Director Gausser, and then Director Byrd, and then Director.
Yeah, so as a former member, I deja vu on a lot of these things coming up, but a couple of quick comments, observations. Before I left, I was the chair of the ad hoc committee on board governance, and one of our concerns was orientation for new board members. And what I see here is fantastic. It's a huge improvement from the time I was on the board, and it's a lot of wealth of information. I think this is excellent, and it's good to see that something that I worked on before got implemented, and so you guys took it to heart, so that was great. I don't know, I'll read much, but I know, I'll read a lot of it. The strategic plan, I'm sure Scott knows that I read the last one, so I do get into the weeds there, and I appreciate that. The other comment about SR 85, I also was the board chair of SR 85, where we got it over the goalpost, you might say, and the board did approve the center lane, that it could be done. Funding wasn't there, but there is something in place to do that, and that is very close to my heart because Mountain View is the end there. And we were always looking at the congestion. And if you go down 85, like I do sometimes heading south, you will see that traffic congestion and it's still there. So it's there, just let's get together and see what implementation could go there. The question I had was, again, what's happening with now North Bayshore, or our North Bayshore and Mountain View is the workforce is decreasing pretty rapidly. How is VTA reacting to that, and how will that change the model of transportation into that area?
It's a great question. Maybe what I'll do is zoom out a bit and just talk about how the annual service planning process responds to a changing travel market. Because, North Bayshore is changing, Moffett Park is developing, Gilroy is developing in areas. There's things happening all over the county. And so in order for our transit network to remain relevant and attractive product for people, we have to adapt to what's changing and even proactively, foresee and react in advance. And so we're always looking at data. So we're watching what's happening in North Bayshore, we're watching transit ridership changes. From time to time, we would pull big data sources. So like, for example, right now, we're working with a consultant to mine cell phone movement data, including in North Bayshore, to see what's happening, because it gives us a non-transit look at travel patterns. And then also, I don't want to undersell this, continually talking to city staffs about their plans and what's really happening on the street. What's in the general plan? What areas are you developing? What is your long-term strategy for an area? How can the transit network support that? Does it line up with the transit network, or do we need to adjust our transit network, et cetera? So, for example, in Mountain View, we're having lots of conversations about the right way to serve downtown Mountain View when Castro Street is closed, for example, and how do you serve that? And then how do you serve up to North Bayshore with the current 40, and will that become a frequent route someday? So, but specifically with North Bayshore, we hope that as that area becomes more diverse set of uses, that actually can be a very good thing for Route 40, and we can make it a frequent route. I'd love nothing better than to make 40 a frequent route someday, if the land uses all come together there. So, I guess I just wanted to reiterate the point that it's important. We continually work with the city staffs on adjusting our network based on what's happening on the ground. Within limited resources, of course. We want to put more service everywhere.
One other observation, I'm so glad to see so many promotions. There's a lot of familiar faces out here, and they're all new titles, and so I'm glad to see that they are all elevated within. So that was a great thing, and look forward to working with them. My one last question concerning light rail. When I left, there was like $500 million to purchase light rail and modernize it. What's the status of modernizing light rail, and has the cost of the cars come down, or there's a transition plan on that?
Do you want to answer some of that, and I'll take the next?
Maybe let's cover it briefly, and that would be worth
just-
getting a fuller update.
We're going to get a fuller
It's a great
update
question.
on the light rail.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
It's moving forward. I'm going to try to come up with a concise update. Moving forward, we have been researching different light rail vehicles and different technologies to propel the vehicles, I guess propulsion and power kind of technologies. Also looking at the specs of the vehicles and opportunities to do something perhaps more innovative, as well as we're doing some service planning on the side of service planning to make sure that we right-size the fleet procurement depending on where we want to take our light rail network in the future. So that visionary network that I talked about includes running light rail every line at 10-minute service. And so we're doing some work to identify the capital projects that are required to do that, exactly how many vehicles it would be, and what size vehicles, and the demand, the ridership levels that we expect. So it's light rail gets very complicated, as you know, very quickly, and so it takes some time. So I'm sure we are in fact coming to the committees this year, and we'll be talking more about what's going on there.
Yeah, SSTP&O will be quite busy with the light rail activities. We did go out for a pilot on to look at vehicles, a pilot project for vehicles off catenary. That was not as successful because it's a very large expense. There's lessons learned. We're going to be coming back with those lessons learned to SSTP&O about that and where we're going to go next, which will be actually going out for a fleet. We have to get ready for changing our fleet out. There's been a lot of analysis done there. We also brought in somebody to do a lot of simulation for us on our light rail systems. So not only are we able to see what length of cars we want, but where some improvements are specific and help us to the traffic signals that are causing us the most problem, so we can focus on transit priority. So there's a whole series of it where all these improvements will be able to come together. But we are really looking also at trying to run some light rail off catenary in some areas. And then that also allows, if there is any extension, say we ever go into the airport or something like that, we wouldn't have to run on catenary. And it's a much cheaper function for us to be actual construct and extend.
And one last fun fact, I have the privilege of working with a mother-daughter team. The mayor of Mountain View is Ellen Kamei, and I get to work with her mother, a board member, Kamei, here. So it's, I got to watch myself.
And John, I just want to thank you for your work on governance. When I was Cindy's vice chair, and we talked about the vision we wanted for orientations going forward, and just for governance improvements generally, we always look back to that work, and so glad to have you on. We're going to go to, I think it was Bert and then Weinberg.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things. One, when Jay was really talking about how our service per capita is lower in other agencies, I don't know if we might be able to get that slide 49 back up. That really ties into the discussions that are going on the regional tax measure with MTC. And we've been looking, and this, for those who are already on the board, know that this has been a big discussion the last year plus. But we've been looking at whether we would be focusing on the renewal of our Measure A, or the regional measure, or some combination of the two. But the regional measure is primarily focused on the deficits that are projected for the transit agencies that are rail dependent and, like our light rail, are far down below pre-COVID levels. And that is BART, the biggest, San Francisco MTA, and Caltrain. But an argument that we have made, and much of the rest of the region says, well, VTA is not facing these operational deficits that the other agencies are. And that's because 20 plus years ago, we made the very difficult decisions to tighten our belt and have a sustainable budget by reducing that service level. And so the argument that those of us from VTA who are on that board are making is that what we really ought to be talking about is, for those agencies, it's sustaining their service levels and not having to do big cuts. For us, it's restoring. But either way, it is basically providing for a baseline service level, a reasonable service level. So we actually are looking at doing the same thing, but ours is restoring, theirs is preventing cuts. And so all of us are going to really need to be kind of champions of that point of view of why VTA needs our share of the funds to restore service. And that goes to the other part that Jay talked about in 2017, I think he said it was, where we went from tweaking this model and the tension between coverage and ridership. And we're 90% focused on ridership and 10% on coverage. And that means the South County cities, the West County cities, some of the Northwest County cities are in weak coverage. I didn't see anything that showed a comparison of us versus other agencies and how they balance that tension, but it's a big issue. It's for those, particularly for those cities. And so as we look at our upcoming Measure A renewal, this will be one of our important discussions, is how do those dollars go toward what balancing of those needs? And both needs exist. It's not one or the other. We also are an exceptionally low fare box recovery agency. And this is one of the things that we've discussed for several years on SSTPO, is how do we address that? What are our goals? And in some circumstances, you know, we talk about for those who are in need of transit as a lifeline service, fare box recovery isn't our biggest goal. It is meeting their essential needs. But for the agency as a whole, we need to get better fare box recovery. So this is another big tension and issue that we have going forward. And then lastly, it was alluded to on, you know, how do we respond to where we're having significant growth in our communities and having these service levels respond to that growth. There's another dimension, which is with the electrification of Caltrain, lesser stops, stations now have much more frequent service. And so they are becoming attractions to become a vital part of a network of buses to trains and vice versa. And we really need to look at how we integrate that. We just at in one of our North County stations, California Avenue, the very time that we were increasing the train service there, the tentative plan, which has been held back on now, was to decrease the bus service from one of the lines. So these are tensions that we need to be aware of and just know that they're not easy solutions, but I want to get them on the radar.
Thanks so much, Director Weinberg.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Madam General Manager, for this orientation. Like my colleagues, I found it extremely useful, and my thank you and compliments to you and your staff. I'm actually glad that I'm going right after Member Burt because my question kind of follows up on what he was saying. I'm curious how VTA identifies what are our peer agencies. I mean, an awful lot of information and data and insight can be gathered from comparisons, but it's only valid if you're comparing VTA with similarly situated agencies. And I have some familiarity with AC Transit, some familiarity with LA Metro. I understand why that's not considered a peer agency. I mean, I don't know anything about Utah's UTA. But I'm just curious if someone could talk a little bit about what the process was in identifying peer agencies, and if that's a dynamic process to look at other agencies that may be further away or maybe closer where we could get other insight. Because when you're making your comparisons, especially to the board, as an argument of here we're doing really well here, or we have opportunities to improve there, if those agencies are sort of cherry picked in a certain way, a message can be made that may not be the most objective or best message.
That's a great question. There's probably no right answer for picking peer agencies. Well, there's definitely no right answer for picking peer agencies. The peers that we picked for this exercise would be different than the peers that we might pick for example, an APTA ridership report. We use all of the peers that APTA, the National Association, puts us into the category of all large bus agencies. And so to answer your question, though, how we selected the peers, it's a mix of a bunch of things: land use types, the size of the system, and the number of vehicles that we pull out, ridership, et cetera. Kind of those kind of structural, fundamental things. But when you're doing like a service planning exercises, obviously you would look at whether it's a bus-only agency or if it has a light rail system, et cetera. So, yeah, I guess it's a great question. There's no right answer on these things. When we present this information on the service levels per capita, we spread a wider net than we perhaps normally do when we look at our peers, because some of them are not the most directly comparable. But just to give you the information so that we're not hiding anything, we cast a wider net so you can see everybody, and we can all kind of make decisions on how much Seattle is actually like San Jose, et cetera.
Yeah, and I would say in the Bay Area, there's technically about, there's the 7 large transit agencies, so those would typically be our peers, depending on what you're comparing. We don't really compare ourselves to BART because BART's not a bus agency as well. So there's things like that we do. And then when it comes to nationally, it is sort of a mix of who has light rail and a bus fleet and is similar. So Utah has almost exactly the same amount of light rail miles and almost the same size bus fleet, maybe 100 more buses in their system. Similar with DART is a little bit bigger. Denver, they're similar. There are peer agencies that we look to all the time, and a lot of that comes from the American Public Transit Association as to who you're sort of compared to in lumps. So they actually do a lot of work in that as well. And then we still belong to the benchmarking, the LRT? And so we also belong to a benchmarking group that's done, and they provide you data from all like agencies so that we're able to compare ourselves at a number of categories across. So there's different ways that we do it, but we take that information. Oftentimes you want to see some of the local ones, so like Samtrans or AC Transit, but then we also need to look at where we're at with Utah and others who are also funded by sales tax or other type things that we have.
Thank you very much.
I'll just say it's a great question, and just my personal opinion is there's no one perfect comparator, and so it's all these factors are just something to keep in mind and ask those questions as they come up. Did we have any other? Yeah, go ahead, Director Montano.
Thank you, Chair, and again, yeah, this is a great, I'm glad that you're doing this program for us. It's, even though I've been served on the board for quite a while now, but it's always good to come back and refresh, forget a lot of things. So I have a question for Tyree. On slide 45, on the VTA transit ridership growing, I'm just wondering why you included both the transit and the paratransit. So I'd like to see separate the transit and separate the paratransit, so we can get a better picture of the true ridership trends. And also, you mentioned that, you mentioned long-term strategy, changing the model of transportation and adapting to change. So, slide 49, that's the one where I really feel that we need to, we're kind of on the bottom of the totem pole. I really feel that we need to focus on projections, developing a new generation of riders. And just as Director Kamei had mentioned, we need to make it a client, they're the customers. And I think we need to start focusing on ridership. We cannot be depending on the federal funding all the time. And we do have a low fare box recovery, and we just need to start focusing on that, on improving that. I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, every day I see the buses, they're always empty or half empty. So, maybe not in certain parts of the county, but a lot of buses need to have more people in there. I really feel that we need to focus on getting that ridership up, and I want to see some changes in there. And that's about it, what I have on that. But yeah, we need to start focusing, because we're on the fare box recovery. There's not enough riders, and focusing on the new generation is where I feel that we need to focus on. Also, before I forget, Mr. Singh, Milpitas High School has almost 3,400 students. There's only one bus shelter. If you can look into that, because when it's raining, I see them out there, they, and to me, the parents don't want to see their kids get wet, so it takes away from our fare box recovery, so, so I'd like you to look into that. Thank you.
Thank you. And we can follow up with the appropriate members of the planning team as well for that. Great points. I think I didn't see any other questions, so if not, I'll turn it over to Greg Richardson, our Deputy General Manager.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to the board. We're going to go over everything you want to know about VTA finances in 15 minutes. And so we'll try to go over, really, the reference we'll use for most of the presentation is going to be the previous budget. The budget usually is a nice way for folks to see sort of everything that goes on within the agency. But at the same time, again, we are going to go through, a pretty extensive financial framework in a very short period of time. And so if there's anybody on this panel here on the board who wants to have some time to go over some things individually, please feel free to reach out to me or Jaden, which I didn't mention. I'm joined here by Jaden Sanga, who is the Deputy Director and Controller for VTA. We'd be more than happy to sit down and go through any of these elements or other elements related to the overall financial picture for VTA. So feel free to reach out to us. Am I controlling these things? The answer would be yes. So what we'll do is on the proposed budget, so this is just a picture. Carolyn had mentioned before the complexity, I guess you could say, of VTA, that it's not just a transit organization. So these are the funds that ultimately in a couple of months, this body is going to be seeing as we put forward the budget. And so these are separate, distinct funds that are budgeted separately from and inclusive of the transit operations itself. And so this is just showing you a little bit about that complexity that does exist from a financial component. And again, they're all in most cases separate and distinct. They're siloed. The funding is siloed. What you will see as we move forward, and we'll talk a little bit about it when we talk about cash, there's going to be opportunities where, and even now we're doing it with the TOD fund. So TOD will help support some of the activities that go on when we talk about the move that we're doing on the corporate headquarters. Express lanes, ultimately, there'll be an opportunity for us to utilize those funds that are created from the express lanes to help support operations. So we're going to find ways in which to identify those, call them new revenue sources, to help support operations that may not currently exist today, and find a little bit more variability in what we provide from an operations perspective. The following pages, and I'm not wanting to go through each of these very in detail, but they're just showing you, again, just each of these different funds and what they're meant to do. And the information on here is really what was provided, again, for the 24-25 budget cycle that was done a year and a half ago. And so for the VTA Transit Fund, this is the main fund that people would know. This is for both operations as well as capital, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we discuss on the cash flow side. Congestion management, another big element, also been discussed here as far as what we do as an agency. A lot of this is really about efficiency and improvements within the overall congestion system or the network itself and the overall congestion management process. Silicon Valley Express Lanes, again, we've talked a little bit about this. This is the overall Express Lanes program. This is really just the operational element. The capital component is housed within the VTP program. On the TOD side, both operations as well as capital, again, just capturing the information, capturing the activities that go on from transit-oriented development, transit-oriented communities, both from a rental perspective as well as some of the activities that go on from a capital perspective to help other cities and overall development of transit-oriented developments and communities within the county. The VTP highway, this has little stuff on here. Let's just get that. There you go. So this is really how we function with all of the elements related to highway express lanes, bike ped, everything that you'll see on this. A lot of this is funded completely outside of VTA funds. Local funds are not necessarily used here. The difference here is going to be express lanes, because again, we will develop a program, and actually there will be some information provided next month on an expenditure plan that will help utilize some of the express lanes revenues that are generated to help then support express lanes that then in turn will help support operations. So that will become a little bit more self-sufficient. It still relies on federal and state funds, grants to help support the overall development, but we'll try to utilize as much as we can internally to help build out that overall program. The 2000 Measure A, the sales tax program, so this page here is really on the operation side. This is identifying the revenues that are coming in, and the expenses on this are really related to the transfer of monies that go to transit operations, as well as then the debt service associated with bonds that were issued many, many years ago to support the overall development of the 2000 Measure A sales tax program capital side. So that's the distinction that's here on this. Again, this has a couple of little things here just to finish out. And of course I did that. And so the main programs here, again, just to reiterate, right now the primary focus that I would say that utilization of Measure A is EBRC, East Ridge to BART Regional Connector, and then the BART Phase 2 project. Those are, I'll call them the key projects that are going on right now, but there are several other projects that are still in process that the board elected to continue moving forward with that were being cash flowed out back in October, I think it was, as far as where the priorities were for the Measure A program. Carolyn had mentioned a little bit about 2008 Measure B. Again, separate, distinct sales tax that's being received, and it is specifically identified for the operations. We call it BART operations. There is a capital element to this as well. That's just baked into the O&M component that BART has for the overall system. But this particular program is specific to BART operations, capital elements related to it for the current operations as well as the future operations. And then the 2016 Measure B sales tax just lists the different categories that exist for the 2016 program. And then as the budget is prepared each year, Jane Shin, who you'll meet very soon, not necessarily today, but during the budget process, will identify all of the different needs from both a formula-based as well as needs and capacity, and develop the budget as it relates to the utilization of the 2016 Measure B program. Now to my favorite slide. Everyone laughs at my slide. I don't know why they laugh at my slide. I can't improve on this slide. This is perfect. But it was my slide, basically, when I first got here, to help me understand and help others understand sort of the flow of funds that exist within VTA. Because there was always this desire to see everything on a very consolidated basis. And the reality is, you really, from a financial perspective, you really can't do that. You can't combine all of these things. The purpose of this, when I did it, was really to help me understand and hopefully to help others understand how things flow through on the VTA transit side, how that flows through to the capital side, and then the distinct flow of funds for the other measures that exist and what they're used for. And so the idea here is, when you look at the VTA transit between farebox, the 1976 sales tax, which is all operations, and then the STA TDA, all of those flow through into the VTA transit operating fund. And then along with that, you get a small percentage from 2016 Measure B, you get about a 21% allocation from Measure A, and then you'll get some grants and other revenues that flow through. The idea is you get all of these different sources that components of each are all flowing into the VTA transit side. The other thing to keep in mind is when it comes to operations and capital, generally speaking, as it relates to VTA transit, there's one source of funds that is going to fund both transit operations and transit capital, and that is those items we just talked about. And so the first primary function for those funds is going to make sure that operations is taken care of. And so fundamentally, the only way you're going to get capital dollars flowing through for local fund purposes is if there's a surplus. I mean, that's the only real way that monies can flow through to help support capital. And if you don't have that surplus, then there's going to be a point when you're not able to enhance that capital fund, and you got to find other streams. But that local piece is important to us because that's the matching component for grants and other things like that. So it's a framework to help everyone understand sort of those flows, how distinct they are, how separate they are, in some cases how they work together. But it's important to keep this in mind And one of these days I'll improve this slide, but you know, it's pretty, by golly. Thank you very much, Rosemary. On the sales tax measures, just to keep everybody engaged as far as what we've got. So we've got the 4 primary sales tax measures. So the 76, the great thing about 76, in perpetuity. Love that. Half-cent sales tax, and it shows what our 24 actuals were for it. 2000 Measure A, this is the one that's most critical for us right now. It's a half-cent sales tax, but it does have an expiration March of 2036. 2008 Measure B, again, this is the one that funds the BART O&M. It's an 8-cent sales tax, has a expiration June of 2042. And then 2016 Measure B, again, half-cent, March 2047, as far as when it expires. The 2000 Measure A, as we said, is the critical one. As we develop and look at the regional measure, how it will work with a regional measure and how we'll develop the overall program and how that moves forward. A lot of that will be based on feedback that we get from voters and some of the surveys that are being done. The last is the vehicle registration fee. Just wanted to make sure people are aware of this, that the county approved a measure, gosh, I think it was back in 2007, 8, 9-ish, somewhere in that time frame, $10 per vehicle. And this helps support local roads, local streets, helps that process along. Actuals, you know, we generated about a little less than $16 million of money, revenues that came through. Actually, during the year, I think we spent, distributed about $17 million. That difference is okay because there's an actual fund balance for that particular account of sitting about $30 million. So there's enough money to ensure that we're supporting those programs. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jaden, and he'll talk a little bit about the 25 to 26.
Good morning, Jaden Sangha. I'm Deputy Director of Finance for VTA. So on this slide here, we have the VTA Transit Fund revenues. This is a composition of where we generate all of our revenues for the Transit Fund. So if you see the piece of the pie that's the largest, it's the blue sales tax revenues, $290 million. That's our 1976 sales tax. We have TDA revenues, Measure A subsidy that's coming in, 2016 Measure B, and STA revenues. These are all sales tax-driven revenues that are coming into Transit Fund. And the point we have to note here is that over 85% of our revenues for the Transit Fund are sales tax-driven, which determines our risk profile as an agency because we're heavily reliant on sales tax as an agency. And there's fair transit for paratransit and also fares that are roughly 3 to 4% of the overall Transit Fund revenues for the agency. On the next, we have the Transit Fund expenses composition here for fiscal year 2025. Again, a similar picture here. The labor cost is our biggest piece of the pie, so that's $426 million for fiscal year 2025, which roughly equates to 70% of our total expenses for the Transit Fund. And the rest of the composition is the other pieces of the pie, materials and supplies, safety and security, insurance, debt service, that makes up of the total $624 million budgeted for fiscal year 2025. This is our fiscal year 25 6-month performance. These are the first 6-month actuals that have come in. Again, the picture that we've shown to the board as we presented our Q1 and Q2 is that sales tax continues to trend downwards for the agency. And again, our reliance on sales tax is pretty heavy for VTA, so that makes up a big deficit position for us for the first 6 months. Again, for 6 months, we budgeted $281 million in sales tax revenues, and actuals came in at $262 million, so there's a deficit of $18 million. The second piece of the pie here is the labor cost is slightly higher than where we budgeted, so there's a deficit there of 6.2. Overall, we're in a deficit position for the first 6 months of fiscal year 25 in the amount of $12.5 million. These are our fiscal year 2025 projections, where we're projecting to end the fiscal year 25. Again, sales tax will continue to trend down for the remainder of the year. Our labor costs will continue to escalate. So those are the two pieces that we see where there will be a big aberration from where we budgeted and where we are and where we will be for the end of the year. We're projecting to end the year, fiscal 25, with a operating deficit of $46.8 million. I'll turn that over to Greg for cash and reserves.
This is my last one, and then Jaden will take the rest. One of the things I wanted to make sure that this body understood a little bit more is, again, going back to the flow of funds, the siloed sort of component to it and how distinct they have to be maintained. And we'll hear, and you'll see, I mean, you'll see the numbers here. I mean, our total cash and investments as an agency on the left-hand side, this is as of February 2025, sits at about $2.2 billion. A lot of money, a lot of cash. That's very understandable, and that can get lost in translation when people look at it and say, you guys are sitting on a bunch of cash. So the thing I want to make sure everyone understands is, again, going back to 2000 Measure A, staying on the left-hand side. 2000 Measure A, Measure B, 16 Measure B, and even the other funds. Most of those, every one of those funds, minus the transit, and we'll talk about transit in a second, those are very specific, purposeful dollars that have to be utilized in a particular way. So we need to keep them separate. They're effectively already spoken for. And so there's really nothing that can be done differently with those funds for the most part. Now, there might be some tweaks here and there, but it is part of our total cash position, but it's also part of our responsibility from what we have to make sure stays there so that it's available for the purposes of whether it's capital programs within Measure A and 2016 Measure B, or other programs as it relates to the other cities, or within the 2008 Measure B that we're staying focused on maintaining the dollars available for BART O&M. So that leaves the transit piece. And so on the transit side, this is the funds that when you think about transit operations or the overall, the transit, sitting at about $745 million. The important thing to note here is there are requirements from a reserve perspective, and I've sort of put in quotes reserves because these are both reserves that are mandated effectively by policy, but then also reserves that we want to make sure that we've identified that, again, we've made commitments and those dollars need to be there. And this is one of the first things that I looked at when I first got here, was ensuring that the operating reserve, which is a requirement, 15% of the future year's operating budget, is maintained. So that $93.7 million. The sales tax stabilization, again, was a mandated account or balance that needed to be maintained in the event that sales tax got to a point where we needed to step in and help support on that number. The Transit Capital Fund was an item that we created back with the last budget that identified a specific funding source to help ensure that we had money to do capital projects. Again, going back to that previous conversation about there's only one source of funds for capital, and that's in the transit side. So we wanted to make sure that we had dedicated funds so that when we got into the 26-27 budget cycle, there were available dollars to ensure that we could move forward with certain capital projects. And so those we want to make sure are there. And then the debt reduction fund is an old term, and ideally I want to change this to just basic reserve. That is our reserve. That's what we would utilize in emergency situations or when something happens, with the deficit situation or something like that. That's really the amount that we have available to us. And then the local share capital projects. Again, commitment. The concept here is these are capital projects that have been approved by the board in the budget, meaning that we've made commitments to these projects or what we're going to do, so those dollars need to be available. The idea behind all of this is every one of those, call it reserves and funds, from my perspective, requires that you have cash available to support that. And so the link that I would make you look at is between transit dollars, the 745.1, which is in your top left, and then your total reserves on that second one on the right, that those two should be pretty close. Now, the only reason transit is different than total reserves in this case is the timing. We're looking at balances as of February 2025, and the net reserves or the total reserves is as of the end of fiscal year. The cash should be a little bit higher, and it is. Trust me, it is. But those two need to be linked together. And what I'm trying to point out to you is, yes, there is a lot of cash. Yes, there's a lot of cash on transit, but it's got very specific purposes, and we're going to be very limited in how we can utilize that going forward. So that's really the point I want to make on this when we evaluate overall cash, overall availability, where funds are, and how they exist. And then the last piece on this is just a reference for our pension programs, both our CalPERS, VTA, and the ATU pension. Their fund assets sitting at 435 and 710 respectively. The funding percentage, a little bit lower than maybe some would want. It's not necessarily out of the realm of reality. I think ideally you'd like to see 75 to 80%. And so we'll continue to monitor that. On the OPEB side, other post-employment benefit fund is at 401, and it's actually overfunded. So it sits at about 123%. So that's the position we've got right now from cash, reserves, and pension OPEB.
I want to just make sure everybody understands, when we talk about transit capital, it's not capital for projects like the big capital projects we have or defined. It's specifically for state of good repair, replacement of vehicles, replacement of facilities, maintenance projects on facilities, rail replacement, that type of work. So it's capital maintaining our system.
I always forget that. Always has to remind me. Yeah.
All right, on this slide, we have a quick timeline of our budget process. Currently, we're in the process of developing our fiscal year 26-27 budget, and here's the timeline. Currently, we're in the process of getting pretty close to developing the proposed operating budget, and that'll come to all the committees and ultimately coming to the board in June of 2025. These are some of the concerns that we're seeing, and I think this is in line with what we discussed already. The sales tax projections are lower than expected, so that trend will continue into fiscal year 26-27, and you'll see that those trajectories headed downwards. Our goal is to maintain and grow service. Again, in the wake of sales tax decline, we'll need to reassess that. Safety and security is our priority for operator and passenger safety, and we'll make sure that that is budgeted in. And there's positions that are budgeted as relates to safety and security for VTA, and there's special events that are coming up like Super Bowl and FIFA, and that will add pressure to having more safety and security for the agency. This is a timeline for the fiscal year 26-27 biannual budget process. Again, we issued call for projects back in September of 24. We're currently in the process of developing the capital budget, and that will also come to the committees on the board by June of 2025. Same concerns as Carol and Greg mentioned. We have a specific pot of money that's available for capital projects. That's not additional monies that are coming in. If we have $152 million that are set aside for the capital transit fund, and we only add to that fund when the operating budget is in a surplus position. So if we have a surplus in the transit operating budget, then we add to this fund. If that's in a deficit, then that's the only pot of money that's available to allocate towards any capital projects that we're looking to fund for the upcoming fiscal year of 26 and 27 budget cycle. This right here is the 5-year baseline projections. And again, I want to bring your attention to the operating balance at the very end. We're showing a deficit position in 2025, and that's where we're going to end up most likely because we have 6 months of data of actuals coming in for revenues and expenses. So we're projected to be in a $46 million in deficit position, and that will likely continue on. Again, this is based on a lot of assumptions that we put into our long-range financial plan. There's immediate data for sales tax receipts that we get from a consultant. So we have 25 and 26. That's based on sales tax consultant numbers that we've been provided with. And then 27, 28, 29, 30, that's based on a long-range financial plan that we follow, which takes into account a recessionary period and also looks at how much a sales tax will take a hit. The other big component here is the labor cost, and that cost is significantly higher compared to all the other costs that we have in the expenditure line items. So $449 million, that's assuming all the positions are filled at the agency, that's where we would be. And that cost is growing at a 3% rate going forward until 2030. So that increase is pretty significant. The other thing is we've taken into account that we're not expanding our agency, the workforce, at a level that we did before. This is assuming that we add 10 new positions each year for our agency going forward. So there's also that to keep in mind and making sure that we stay within those parameters as we move forward. And that's the pressure that we're going to see in the operating balance numbers for the upcoming years. This slide here is that we have 4 quadrants here, the major areas of forecasted volatility. We wanted to point these things out, and this is true for any local government agency in California. So we have top left, these are high impact items for VTA that we have very low control. Economic pressures is one that ultimately decides our sales tax revenues. Electrification of light vehicles. We in California, there's a mandate in 2030 that all new vehicles sold will be hybrid in California, so that will determine the future of our service station revenues that we generate through sales tax. There's existing labor and pension cost. Greg talked about the CalPERS discount rate and the funding levels that we have. So there's a potential for unfunded pension liabilities for VTA. We have sales tax sunsets. Measure A is sunsetting in 2030, and then others are following. So needing to keep that in mind. There's CDTFA settlements. So California Department of Tax and Fee Administration is chasing some cities on how they treat the destination sales tax versus where the transactions are happening. So that could impact our TDA revenues potentially going forward. That to keep in mind. And any unknown contingencies for VTA, if there's a system failure or something, we have that's a high impact item that we have very little control over. On the right hand side at the top, these are areas we have high control and high impact. So staffing levels and how we grow as an agency, how many FTEs we add per year will determine the future and our fiscal position going forward. Our service planning that Jay Tyree talked about, how many service hours are we budgeting for each fiscal year, and how many operators do we need to provide that service planning. VTA capital spending is another one, COLA and benefits, and our reserves. What do we use our reserves for? Are they set aside just for operational deficits, or can we use those for one-time capital spending? And those type of discussions needs to be had. And then the bottom two are low impact, low control, VTA ridership, volatility of fuel prices. These are small ticket items that we have less control on. And then the bottom right is the staff vacancy savings. These are one-time savings and et cetera that we realize in any given year that we have some control, but they have a low impact on the budget. And that concludes our presentation. We'll be happy to take questions.
Thanks so much. So we'll go to questions. We are coming short on time, and so depending on the questions go, we'll likely go to Evelyn's portion next. But this is obviously an important section, so I want to take this. Yes, Director Bozo.
First real quick question is for Greg. Back on slide 67, that shows a revenue of 22 and 15 million. Is that correct?
It's a net deficit for that. So you got revenues coming in of 87.5, expenses of 109.
Okay.
There's a fund balance that exists for 2000 Measure B of about $300 million. So we're okay with it showing like this because we'll always use that reserve. That's what it's for.
Yeah, that's my next question. Where did how do you reconcile those losses through that fund balance?
So a lot of those funds came in earlier than some of the expenses had started happening, and so we built up a reserve fund balance for that. And so it's there. It's part of the overall macro view of what this overall program will be. And so as we model out, we're taking into consideration that existing balance that exists and making sure that every year, if there are deficits, then they are being able to be funded and we still maintain a favorable balance going forward.
Then my next question will be for Jaden. Is it the same philosophy? As you sit here, you talked about 5 years of multi-million-dollar losses every single year. Like your each year loss is bigger than my city's general fund, and you do it in the most calm manner that I've ever seen. So I know I don't expect a super long explanation, but sure. How do you sleep at night?
Greg and I have this discussion almost every day on, how do we tackle this issue? But I mean, this is a forecasted numbers, right? A lot of things could change. Sales tax could start growing in a direction that we would like to see. So there's a recession expectation that's built into these numbers. So that's assuming that in fiscal year 27, 28, there's a recession that our sales tax take roughly a 10% hit in 2 years combined, right? And that may not be realized at that percentage. It could be, 5% decline or something. We're trying to be as conservative as we can with these numbers, but they could change and our fiscal position may be better. To answer the question as to where the money's coming from, that's the reserves that we set aside. So the operating reserves that we have, our debt reduction fund set aside that we have, our sales tax stabilization fund, those funds are limited. So that's where we need to really kind of pay attention to our cost, labor cost, our capital funds and what's being allocated, and how quickly we expand as an agency. Our workforce, how quickly we expand, how much of a increase can we really afford to the wages that are built in. So all of these things are kind of tying into this picture here. But again, our plan is that on a quarterly basis that we recalibrate our long-range financial plan with the new projections that are given to us from the consultant and really reassess the numbers and see what that does to our fiscal position going forward.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks much. Director Cohen first, and then Director McAllister and Burt.
Yeah, on this slide, this 5-year projection, are the assumptions of deficit based on resolving each previous year's deficit, and then that's a subsequent deficit, or are these cumulative deficits?
These are cumulative.
Oh, okay. So so only projecting a $5 million deficit second year to add to the 46 million in the first year. Is that how I interpret this?
No, sorry. Each of these are standalone.
Each of these are standalone,
Yep.
assuming resolving the previous years. This is not a cumulative deficit.
Or you're going to have $97 million deficit after 2
combined.
Okay,
years.
just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director, I think Burt and then McAllister.
Thank you. So I think this is the first time we've seen this revised projection, and particularly on the sales tax. You've been talking the last couple of months about how sales tax for this fiscal year is well below projections. We got the projection that, we have the revised projection versus the budgeted amount, but we don't have the FY24 to show whether in absolute dollars we're seeing an actual decline, it looks like, in sales tax. Because this, I think, the previous slide that had the budgeted versus projection showed about a 6% decline from projection, or from budgeted to current projection. But I don't know what the FY24 was in absolute dollars. We're seeing absolute dollar decline in sales tax?
We are. We're seeing an absolute decline. And again, I think fiscal '24, the ultimate operating position was in the positive because we had some operating grants that came in, and our labor costs, there was some vacancy savings that came in. I'd have to go back and take a look as to what the fiscal '24 sales tax numbers were. But these are the numbers. This is for fiscal year '25, and this is what we're seeing based on the first 6 months of the actuals that have come in.
And then going back to that slide 75, I was very surprised to see we're going from a single year of a very anomalous decline in sales tax revenue and a significant decline from our budget to a continuation of that for really a 4-year period of essentially flat sales tax. I've never seen anything like that in 20 years of city finances. You mentioned that you're being conservative and that you've got a recession built in here in 27, 28. But I guess I look forward to seeing a further breakdown in what are the premises that are going in here. And of course, this is a bit of a crystal ball, but these are really surprising projections and very meaningful to us. And then lastly, one of the things that we touched on at our last BSV2 ad hoc committee was how these numbers on particularly, Greg emphasized particularly on Measure A dollars, will impact the revenue side for the capital of the BSV2. And we haven't seen that update. Greg, I think you said that it's less impactful on the Measure B, but more so on the Measure A. But now seeing this not just being a single year anomaly, but a 4-year period, scares me.
Yeah, and I'll just touch on that real quick. I mean, I think we will go forward with another sales tax. We will go forward with another sales tax estimate from UCLA. Specifically, it'll go for all of them, but I think this is enough to where, we're recognizing, and again, what we talked about then, the time period of 2000 Measure A and how that impacts the funding plan for BART Phase 2 is the critical nature, because you've got a very finite period of time now that ends at 2036, which is not only for the funding of the project, but then your expectations of long-term beyond, as far as the operational element. And so, so we are going to do that for this. The time period I don't know yet. And so I don't want to rely on our current Avenu, which is the sales tax group that does it now, because it's relatively short term. I'd rather see that longer term view from a UCLA forecast.
Thanks. Director McAllister and then Sale.
On your slide 76, could another word be discretionary income versus spending versus, you didn't use that word, but just for my vernacular, it helped me understand a little better.
As far as which one?
Well,
Just overall?
the cash and sides,
Yeah.
you know, they were discretionary and non-discretionary money, and that's more non-discretionary money because it's set aside.
Correct. And if you wanted to say you have your discretionary number on there is probably your debt reduction fund.
Okay. And then you also mentioned that you had mandates for some of the funds there. Is that board mandates or state?
Right now, we have board policy
Board policy?
that's been set, yeah, at the 15% and the sales tax stabilization.
And has that been reviewed in any recent time to say, is that appropriate or can be revised?
The gentleman to my left would like the number to go up a little bit on the operating reserve, and so we're having those conversations about how exactly that will happen in the process. But we are evaluating whether, in this case, the 15% is the appropriate place, and then the sales tax stabilization would also be
Okay. And Chair, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but will somebody give us a update from the Washington on how some of these funds and money's going to be, or grants could be affected?
Yeah, could we, I'd suggest probably a separate briefing, because we had one maybe about a month ago. But it's definitely one that's on all our minds.
Yeah, we'll do that next month, but at this point on sort of any kind of, we don't know about the grant programs. We get most of our operating funds are not coming through the federal program, but some federal funds, formula funds come through. I don't know at this point whether, the one bill, I'm not sure which passed, does not have any cuts to public transit, but I have to actually see what's going on with the House bill.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask, there might be a lot of questions that come up from this particular presentation, but I know that Evelyn and the whole governance piece, I know we want to do something on that. Can I offer that we can find time for all of those who might have questions and take care of it separately so that we do have time to get through the rest of this? Is that,
Sure,
is that okay?
I appreciate the suggestion, and apologies if we didn't get to everyone's question on this. I'm going to actually skip my piece and go straight to Evelyn, and then we'll continue my section for the next workshop. But thank you for that. I appreciate it. But these are all important questions, so I appreciate it. Yeah.
I am more than happy to meet with everybody and all.
Definitely. Go ahead, Evelyn, if you're.
Okay.
I'll turn it over to you.
So Elaine, that would be slide 90. So we're skipping the chairs. So thank you. Good morning, Evelyn Tran, General Counsel, and an official welcome to our new members. Thank you for sharing your Friday morning with us. So I have basically 5 minutes to talk about the law. And I promise you there will not be a pop quiz at the end of this, and I'm going to do something even better. In your packages in front of you, the General Counsel's Office, with the support of the Board Secretary, we put together a governance primer for you. So it's really meant to be a quick way for you to issue spot. It's not intended to be your sole source of legal guidance. I would suggest that if you have questions that you contact me or your city attorney or your county counsel's office. So, and with that, I will jump into the presentation. Actually, I do want to call out in that package, we have included the Enabling Act, which is basically the state statute that created VTA, as well as our administrative code, which under the Enabling Act, the board is required to adopt. So those are our two main governing documents. It's in that packet in front of you, and I'm going to refer to those documents through my presentation, so I wanted to make sure that I define those for you. Okay, your fiduciary responsibilities. I'm going to try to fly through these. As a board member, whether it's this board that you sit on or any board you sit on, there are certain obligations that you are required to uphold. These are your fiduciary responsibilities. They're basically identified as your duty of loyalty and your duty of care. So what's your duty of loyalty? That is, you can come to the board with all of the information and your thoughts that are specific to your region, but when you make a decision, you should consider VTA as a whole and the county as a whole, because that's our jurisdiction. That's your duty of loyalty. Duty of care. Our packages are huge, but but we assume that you have read them before you come to our board meetings, that you ask questions where you don't understand, that you understand the financial responsibilities of the decisions that you make, and that you make your decisions in an informed manner. That's your duty of care. And there are certain enumerated responsibilities that's in our Enabling Act. I did not put them all here. This is a non-comprehensive list, but included in that is the adoption of the biennial budget, which Greg's team is working on and will be coming to you in a few months. You determine the transportation facilities that we construct and acquire. You fix our rates for service, and then you determine bonds. There's going to be a bond item at your next month's meeting. So those are some of our big things. Next slide, please, Elaine. I'm going to focus on VTA's Code of Ethics because this is particular to VTA. It's included in our administrative code. And it's really just to ensure ethical conduct, to maintain the public trust in the VTA. And it not just applies to you, it applies to us, the employees, the officials, and in some respects, our consultants. There's a lot of thou shalls and the thou shall nots in there. It's a long list. But really, it really can be synthesized down to 4 main principles, right? Public interest first, integrity and impartiality, accountability and transparency, and compliance with the laws. And I promise you that you may have already seen most of this through your own local jurisdictions because it's an encapsulation of like Government Code 1090, all of a sudden, I can't remember the act. Well, let me just move on from that. You would have seen it, but there are some things that are specific to VTA. So for example, Elaine, could you have the next slide, please? For example, no gifts over $50 from current or potential consultants. That is from the FTA circular. So because we are a federal grantee, we also are subject to federal requirements. And so those are specific, and that's in our administrative code. And the rest, like I said, Government Code 1090 and our Political Reform Act. Next slide, please, Elaine. As you can see, I am really trying to fly through because we have this special meeting. So the consequences relating to the violations of our Code of Ethics, there are the statutory ones, but in our administrative code, we have several other things. We have the ability to do a public censure, removal from office, forfeiture of funds if there were inappropriate acquisition of funds, and then the penalties of up to $500 per violation. So my advice is either if there's any question about whether or not there is a conflict, whether it's financial or not, to have a conversation with me in my office. If you do know you have a financial conflict, then you should disclose that interest, refrain from participating in that decision-making process, and if it's closed session, you should withdraw from the room. In fact, actually, under 1090, if you have a financial conflict, you are supposed to disclose and withdraw from the room anyway, so whether it's closed session or open session. Next slide, Elaine. Okay, quickly, I'm going to talk about Government Code 84308. Once upon a time, this only applied to agencies like ours where we have appointed board members. In recent years, it has been expanded to include cities and counties where you have directly elected officials. But really what it does is it basically says if you've received campaign contributions of over $250, you shouldn't be making a decision on that particular item. And the timing is that if you receive that campaign contribution 12 months before that decision, you should refrain from participating, and you should refrain from accepting any campaign contributions for the following 12 months from that decision. You have a couple of options. You can either recuse yourself from that decision, or you can return the campaign contribution. And how VTA helps you with determining whether or not you might have a conflict there. You have your list that you maintain under the Political Reform Act. You're supposed to maintain that list. What we do is in our board memo, and I think that's on the next slide, Elaine, we flag them for you. So at the right below the header of our board memos, we'll say, does the government code section 84308 applies? It's either yes or a no, because there are some exceptions to that. If it's a yes, it means you should look at your list, and we assist by attaching as an attachment to the board memo a list of the consultants and the principles associated with the consultants, so that you can cross-reference your list. So that's how we do it, and if you have a conflict, let us know ahead of time so that we are aware of it. Okay, next slide, Elaine. All right, I'm going to, for the next few ones, we're just going to talk about committees. So we've got quite a few committees. As you're aware, we have our standing committees, and usually these committees here are items before it goes to the board, and these are some of our standing committees: A&F, CMPP, GNA, our CPC, and our SSTPO. Now you know all of the acronyms for them, because I wasn't going to read them all. Next slide, our advisory committees. So we do engage with our communities, and this is where our communities have input in input in some of the things that we do here at VTA. I won't go through them, but only to say that board members are generally not allowed to serve on these committees, except for the Policy Advisory Committee, where alternate board members may serve on that. So these are usually just folks from the community or folks from the local jurisdictions. Next slide. We have several oversight committees. We have two relating to our measure. So we have the 2000 Measure A Committee, and then the 2016 Measure B Citizens Oversight Committee, and then we also have the newly created VTA's BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 Oversight Committee. Next one, we have several policy advisory boards. I know some of our board members are on there. Next slide, Elaine. One back. But that's okay. You know what? I think the slides are there for you, and the primer is there for you, and I will conclude my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And some of this will conclude the next workshop to have more time, and I'll also be addressing committees and some updates there at the next board meeting. So thank you for your time and for understanding that we have to be in closed session by 11:30. Thank you to staff on the presentation, as you heard, the really great work, making sure it's a valuable orientation.
Chair?
Oh, we'll take public comment. Thank
Chair,
you.
I just wanted to confirm that there are no hands raised from the public who's requesting to speak for items in the workshop.
Thank you very much. So with that, we'll close public comment, and we'll go to the back room, right, for closed session. Yeah, thank you, everyone. We adjourn. We'll adjourn.
Official
then.
adjournment, Chair, of the workshop, please.
Okay, so this workshop meeting is adjourned.
And then formally opening the special closed session, please.
And the special session
Closed session meeting
is
is now.
open.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
you. And for the record and members of the public who are joining us, the board will go into closed session, so we'll pause the recording and all the other stuff. Thank you. Thank you. Huh? Yes. They're gonna go.